Welcome to Tales from the Albright, a podcast by the Scranton Public Library. Today we're here with Brianna.
Hey.
And as you can tell, we are discussing Dracula, as promised in our Twilight episodes.
We will never let down on a promise.
No, and vampires.
Oh yeah, and vampires. It is our vampire girl autumn, I believe.
Yes. Yep. I don't know what the summer was here, because I know the meme thing is like Brat Girl summer, but I don't know what it is
Mine
here.
was Sarah J. Maas summer, because I read a lot of Sarah J. Maas this summer. Now I'm reading all things vampire in the fall.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought I would start today, since Brianna was asking questions in the Twilight episodes about the history of vampires and original vampire myths and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to do a brief history of vampires. And then in this episode, I'm thinking we can go through the characters and our thoughts about the characters, and then have this be a two-parter where next episode we talk about the actual plot and events of the book.
It'll take a lot, because Alyssa has a lot of thoughts and feelings.
I do have a lot of thoughts and feelings.
And I have since developed a lot of them. This is a fascinating work, but I'm very excited to get your history of vampirism, because I know very little about it. I learned a little bit piecemeal when I was younger and into these sort of things, but I'm curious to learn more.
Okay, so vampire myths have been around since the ancient world, and there were a lot of different legends in ancient Greece where it was some force or creature that came in and would like drain people's life force.
Oh,
so that's kind of where it sort of started. And then the modern idea of vampires, first appears in old Russian texts from about the 1047. And they used the word upir, which was used to refer to an evil spirit, but they don't know what the actual name of the evil spirit was, because it was one of those folklore traditions where if you speak the name, bad things will happen.
Right.
So the actual original term for vampires just got lost over time.
Fascinating.
And then the term vampire itself came about in 1725. And it was during the Ottoman Empire and Habsburg Wars, when soldiers were sent to Eastern Europe and encountered Slavic folklore for the first time. And so then they would write back being like, this is what the people are doing here. And it tended to be, there was something terrorizing the town. The people blamed it on an undead person. And they would dig up the body, stake it through the heart, or rebury it upside down, or put a brick in its mouth to stop it from going out and attacking the rest of the people.
Wow.
And this led to a great vampiric epidemic that swept through Europe between 1725 and 1755. The actual psychological and like real life issues that led into this was war and disease and economic upheaval set off by the wars, and it just was not a good time.
So that drove like the socio-cultural fears that kind of created this trope. Okay.
Yes, and then they would just blame vampires for all manner of social ills and disease that went through the town. And that wasn't unique to just Europe. I believe in the late 1700s, I'm not exactly sure on the time, but there was the Great Vampire Scare of New England. So it did also come over to the colonies.
But this is happening in both places after the witch scares, right? Because those were really peaking in the 1600s, if I remember my history.
Yeah, and the witch scares came before then, and that was a lot of the same thing, where people didn't understand what disease was, so germs or something mysterious that just seems to be killing off everyone, and so they just come up with an explanation. A lot of time it was a very racist explanation, and then othering people, and it just led into all manner of ills.
Interesting. Okay.
So, since disease was the leading cause that fed into this, I'm going to go over the 4 diseases that were most likely fed into vampire rumors and the traditional myths around vampires. So, the first one is porphyria, which is an issue with the body's production of hemoglobin. It's an issue with the heme component of hemoglobin. And since hemoglobin gives oxygen to the rest of your body, it causes a whole host of symptoms. So it's a sensitivity to sunlight, repeated gum disease that recess your gums, making it look like you have fangs. There's a sensitivity to sulfur in garlic.
Yeah.
And then there's also, you have red urine. So people were like, oh, you're consuming blood because your waste is blood.
Wow.
And then it didn't help at all that often these would lead to facial disfigurement and mental illness. So then that's more othering with the disease. And they didn't know how to treat it at the time. So some doctors actually just were like, I don't know, your blood's messed up, try drinking blood.
Oh my goodness.
Which doesn't help anyone.
No.
Do not drink blood.
No medical advice on this podcast.
And because they didn't have things like blood transfusions that could be safely done.
Right.
Another disease that was commonly associated with it is pellagra, which is a deficiency in B3 or tryptophan. And it's caused by excess consumption of corn and alcohol.
Oh, interesting.
And corn was a relatively new crop to Europe because it's native to the Americas. So when it went over to Europe, people often didn't know how to prepare it properly. So it still had things that aren't digestible and not great for the body.
I mean, to this day, corn is sometimes not digestible, so I guess that checks out.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So they didn't really know how to prepare it properly to reduce the risk of disease. So it is characterized by dermatitis, diarrhea, dementia, and death. But it also could include a sensitivity to sunlight and a general corpse-like appearance because you're just dehydrated and pale and sick.
Wow. Interesting. Okay.
The other one is...
Wait, is this why he says the thing about corn?
I don't know, but I was trying to think about that, and I feel like it makes sense.
That has to... Okay,
It
sorry.
has to
We'll
be.
get no plot yet, but there is the corn monologue. So I'm thinking about that now that you said corn. Anyway, teaser for part 2.
And then the third disease was rabies. So rabies has been an issue for all of human history.
Right.
People didn't know what caused it. And the thing with rabies is once you get symptoms, you're dead.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Now we luckily have vaccines and things like that. So rabies, when you're going through it, it causes pain, avoidance of eating and drinking, fear of light, insomnia, and increased aggression. And it's possible that this influenced where people believed vampires couldn't cross water because of the hydrophobia that comes with rabies.
Interesting.
But rabies tends to be more associated with werewolf lore than vampires.
Weren't bats carrying rabies as well, or can't they carry rabies?
Yes, they very much carry rabies.
Okay, because that's what I was thinking was I know sometimes if you get a bat in your house, you have to be careful of rabies.
Like my mom woke up and a bat was on her face and she had to go get rabies shots.
I like how you just, woke up to a bat on her face.
Yeah.
You sure your mom isn't a vampire?
I mean, you never know.
Or your dad is the vampire? I don't know. Someone in your house turned into a bat. So.
Yeah, but no, that was a bad day. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And then it landed on a box, and I think the story is that my dad threw it out a window. I don't know.
That feels very Dracula. That feels very... It does. That feels like the plot of Dracula.
I also feel like it's a look into my household.
Yes, it is. It's a 90s household, but also features Dracula. I like it.
And then the fourth disease was tuberculosis. So it's wasting. There really wasn't known as cause before germ theory. And then you're coughing up blood, so the blood's in there. And tuberculosis is what went through New England and caused the vampire scare in New England.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just know Keats died of tuberculosis, if I'm not mistaken.
Probably, so many people died.
That's why he died young and beautiful and pale and all that. That's what they say about Keats, the poet. I liked the Romantics.
So then, in addition to all of the disease, decomposition of bodies also contributed to the vampire myth. Okay. Because when they would say, hey, I think this person is terrorizing, I saw an apparition of this person, and they would go dig up the bodies, due to decomposition, sometimes the bloating causes blood and body fluid to come out of your mouth, so it looks like somebody was consuming. Also, with the dehydration of bodies, the skin retracts, so it looks like your hair grew and your nails grew and your teeth grew because everything's receding and dehydrating.
Right.
So they were like, oh, this person's still alive, their hair's growing.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, that wasn't good.
Wow. See, it all makes sense though. Like
Yeah.
it starts to make the pieces click into place about like
Yeah.
this is such a weird thing, like with the garlic thing, where it's like this is just weird. Why?
There's a very much a logic to it.
Yes, that does make sense.
I will say I did read something where in 1725 the royal advisors to, I believe, Queen Catherine were
Russia?
like, yeah,
Oh, okay.
were like, yeah, this isn't real. This is some like disease.
Yeah.
But because people don't have any other explanations, they just make up what explanations they have that seem logical.
Yeah.
So, onto literature featuring vampires. This rose in popularity around the time of the Great Vampire Epidemic. And in 1748, Heinrich Ossenfelder wrote a poem called Der Vampire, and he was followed by John Stragg's The Vampire in 1810. And then Lord Byron had a poem called The Giaour in 1813. And so then he would also be present at the first writing of the modern vampire novel, which was John Polidori's The Vampire in 1819. You know, all of them just have like the vampire.
Yeah, but that was I remember that story because it
Yeah.
was John Polidori, Byron, Mary Shelley, and Percy Bysshe Shelley.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Was
they all-
Mary's sister there too? I feel like Mary's sister was there.
She might have been, but I know those were the four that they talked about what they wrote out of
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And I remember that because Mary Shelley's Frankenstein
Yeah.
comes out of that as well. So that was just the coolest like weekend in the mountains,
Well,
right?
I
'Cause they were in
mean,
the mountains, I think.
They were at a lake in the mountains, and
Okay.
it kind of was cool, but it also was very not cool because it was the year of no summer because a volcano had erupted, and so it was snowing in the middle of July because of the environmental fallout from the volcano blocking out the
Right.
sun, and like crops were failing, and it was a bad time.
Yeah, that was. But they had a mountain retreat and wrote some good literature.
They did.
That's cool though. Yeah, The Vampire is a very common title though.
Yeah.
I see. That's
And then other novels between that and Dracula were Varney the Vampire or The Feast of Blood, which was written during
that feels like a
1940s.
fan fiction.
And Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla, which was written during the 1870s. And then Dracula was written in 1897.
1897. Oh my gosh, so Dracula's newer than our library.
Oh gosh, it is.
That's so crazy. This building that we're sitting in is older than Dracula.
That's so weird to think about. I didn't piece that together.
It's like that whole thing where Cleopatra's closer to like the moon landing than to the pyramids being built. We here are sitting in history. Come visit us. And you too can experience something older than Dracula.
Yes. So we'll be discussing the traditional, original version of Dracula. But there is a different version of Dracula out there. It's the Icelandic version of Dracula. And it's called The Powers of Darkness. And so everyone knew that the translation was a bit off since at least the 1980s. But in the 2000s, a Dutch translator named Hans Camille de Roos discovered that The Power of Darkness is actually a complete different novel. It's an alternative novel, and it was based on a Swedish translation of Dracula that came out as a serial in newspapers. And in The Power of Darkness, the person who did the translation, the original Swedish one, also plagiarized a Swedish priest, Bernard Wastrom's memoir for the prologue. And it has scenes added to it. It's much shorter, so a lot of stuff is cut out. It also has scenes added where a woman is killed by ogres. Jonathan becomes obsessed with one of the vampire women living in Dracula's castle. But in Powers of Darkness, there's only one lady that lives
Not
in
the
Dracula,
three.
not the three. I believe Seward is like brainwashed by one of the vampire women. She's a
Okay.
lady. There's also a lot of commentary on Dracula trying to overthrow Western society. And it's unknown if Bram knew how much this had been changed when he was like, yeah, you can translate it.
Wow.
So it's a whole completely different book, and you can find that. That's the one when we were at the bookstore I bought the time, yeah.
Yeah.
because I was like, I need to read this.
Crazy, yeah.
I still haven't read it because the to-read pile of books is awful.
Yep.
But across all of the vampire tales and legends and folklores, the stories tend to reflect the society it was written in as a way to explain the unknown. So vampires tend to reflect the modern day society that it's written in. And in the early myths, it was fear of disease, while in modern times is often fear of the other or what people are capable of.
See, that's interesting because I was thinking about that when you said that, where I'm like, what about Twilight though? It's a fear of people that are sparkly. Like I'm like so curious what it is in like the years of like maybe even into the late 90s into the late 2000s when it was a thing, because a lot of the books I feel like came out in the 90s that were then adapted. I shouldn't say a lot of the books, the Vampire Diaries books I know, and like I don't remember when Interview with the Vampire was.
That was 80s.
Yeah. So like it's interesting to think about what the cultural moment that was Twilight and that era was, but that's interesting.
I'm not sure, but I feel like it's definitely like a reflection of like culture.
It is. That was deep.
Okay, so that was my history of vampires.
Awesome. I learned a lot.
So now we will go through the characters of Dracula and our thoughts.
Oh boy.
So first, Jonathan Harker.
I just find him so entertaining. My favorite thing though is, and I should preface our whole discussion with, I listened to an audiobook of the original Dracula, but Alyssa also turned me on to Dracula Daily, which is the story written in chronological order with each of the snippets because everything's dated, because it's basically an epistolary novel. So I flipped through that as I was listening to it to get a sense. And Dracula Daily, the print book, which if you're watching us is visible here and available at the library, has great tidbits of people's commentary as they read as well. And my favorite tidbit that I can't unsee is where everyone was like, he's just a wife guy. Like Jonathan Harker is just in love with his wife, and he's just a doting husband. And like, I can't unsee that part of him where I'm like, now he just, for all that he was like a traumatized, fighting vampire hunter, romantic hero, he just loves his wife. And he's a bit of a softie because he like kind of, you know?
Yep, very much so.
I get that from him. But I thought his character was fun and very like valid. And I'm proud of him that he didn't get jealous when all of these men were rallying and were like, your wife is a literal angel on earth. And he wasn't like, geez, guys, stop being weird about my wife.
He's just like, I know.
Yeah, he was like, thank you.
Yeah.
So I do like his character. I thought he was fun. And I didn't realize his hair turned white until later in the book where I saw like illustrations of him with the white hair.
Yeah, because of the stress and everything.
That is relatable. Yeah. I feel like when your hair goes white a little too young from stress.
I will say Jonathan is like my favorite.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I just have like a soft spot for his character. And I'm like, you need to get out of there now.
Yes.
But he also knows that he needs to get out of there.
Yeah.
And I feel like when I read it through the second time, it's very apparent how much he's trying to like gaslight himself into thinking things are fine.
Yep.
And they are not fine.
Not fine. No, when he's literally just thinking about food and he's like, here's the menu, but also this creepy guy in my bedroom.
Yep. Like, I might be on the menu.
Yeah, poor Jonathan.
Okay, so then we have Mina.
I would argue she is our main character.
She is.
I was going to say, she's like, technically he is, but like Mina is the main character, I feel like.
I love Mina.
Yeah,
she's the
awesome.
best.
She's awesome. She's like such a cool, and like that was the thing that I found most striking when I started reading was like the juxtaposition of her story with Jonathan's, where he's in this story already that we're expecting. And meanwhile, we're just getting her and Lucy's cute letters to each other where they're like best friends ever. Yeah. And I'm like, you are so wholesome. And I love you so much.
She's a school teacher.
Yeah. She's just so sweet and like so supportive as a friend and a wife. And I just think she's such a good egg.
And just obsessed with trains.
Yes. The train schedules, man. She's great.
Okay, so now we get on to Lucy.
Poor Lucy. She's just like the poor woman that just gets sacrificed for the greater good. Where it's like, we just need to, she's the plot, where she's like, we need to have someone succumb to Dracula. And I'm sad it was her, because I also really liked her.
Yeah, she was fun.
Yeah, I liked her a lot. It was kind of sad and disturbing when she became a vampire. Spoilers, by the way.
Spoilers for a book that's from
150 years old. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and then we have Arthur.
So here's where I'm going to be completely frank with you, Alyssa. Arthur, John Seward, and Van Helsing are like one amorphous being in my mind called like all of the guys. Van Helsing vaguely has an accent, and Quincy is American, and that's why
Yes.
he's different. I remember him. But those three are like Cerberus. They're like a three-headed being. I can't.
See-
Who are each of them?
Okay, so Arthur is the guy that Lucy ends up marrying.
Okay.
He was like her childhood
yeah.
friend, and then, spoiler for the book,
Yeah.
is the one that kills Lucy
Yeah.
when
poor
she's a
Arthur.
vampire. So I feel bad for him.
And then he's just like traumatized and
Yes.
reeling. Poor man. Yeah.
I feel like he's kind of the one that I never was completely interested in, if that makes sense. Like I
forgot
don't
he was
really,
there.
yeah,
Was he there in the end?
yeah.
Did he go with them on the?
I think
on
he
the...
did. I'm pretty sure he did.
Okay. See, I don't remember him.
Yeah.
Just remember my man.
Sorry,
Quincy.
Arthur. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have Seward. He's the one who runs the asylum
Yes.
and also was in love with Lucy. And he does all of his recordings and contributions to Dracula through dictating it into a dictaphone.
That is fancy technology. Isn't him and Van Helsing have like a million initials after their
Yeah.
name? It's like Doctor of Medicine, Doctor of Philosophy, Doctor of Being Cool. Like he's just got all sorts of letters.
Yeah. And then we have Quincy.
Yes. Oh wait, you skipped Van Helsing.
Well, I'm going to do Van Helsing after because I feel like we need Lucy's 3 suitors first.
Oh yes, because I forgot 3 of them are her suitors. Yeah.
Yeah. Quincy also tries to marry Lucy.
Yes.
Quincy is an American cowboy.
Yeah, that was a juxtaposing element in this audiobook was that it was narrated by a British guy who did British accents for everybody except for Van Helsing, who said the accent was doable. And then Quincy Morris, which was the most bizarre American accent I have ever heard. It was clearly a British person who does not know how to do an American accent.
Isn't he like actually from Texas too? Like Quincy?
Yeah, like that. So like they kind of did Texas, but it was weird. And I knew that man was going to die because the Americans got to die. We are the other to the British in a lot of ways. So I was like, poor Quincy, they're just going to get rid of him, aren't they?
I do love Quincy.
Oh, I
Quincy
do.
is great.
Quincy's probably one of my favorite characters. Yeah. Because he's just this like quintessential cowboy figure where he's like, you
Earnest
didn't pick me, but I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Like, I'll do it.
And he just like has his gun.
Yep. Gunslinging, shooting bats out of the sky.
Yep.
Good aim.
And then we have Van Helsing.
Yes.
I feel like popular culture makes Van Helsing cooler than he actually is in the book.
I don't have any knowledge of who he is from like pop culture.
Oh.
You consume different pop culture.
This is true. Yeah.
I don't
So
even know what.
in like pop culture, he's like #1 vampire hunter, like action. He's great, all this stuff. In the book, he's just like a professor who doesn't want to tell them that they're dealing with a vampire, so he just drops weird clues and then goes on a rant about corn.
Yeah, he likes his corn. Maybe all along he knows that it's actually a disease, and he's just not. He's trying to drop more hints when he tells them it's a vampire to see if they figure it out.
Okay, and then we have Renfield.
Yes, I don't remember Renfield. If I'm being
Renfield
honest.
was the patient in Seward's.
Oh yeah. Who died?
Yeah.
A lot of them die. Some of them die. I forgot about Renfield. Him and his plot lines disturbed me most.
Yes.
With the whole like feeding the flies to
Yeah,
the birds.
Yeah, well, he had
spider.
Yeah, flies to spider, spider to birds, and then he wanted a cat, and Seward said no.
I know, because I was like, you better not hurt a cat. You hurt a cat, I hurt you. Like that's not. We ain't doing that, Seward.
But he also was like possessed by Dracula for a
Yes.
decent chunk of it, and he went through it, and I feel bad for Renfield.
Yeah.
He also died really horribly, so
That was bad. Yeah, I know. His character was pretty sad, and I did appreciate again with the Dracula Daily commentary when we first meet him and Lucy's like pitching all of her potential suitors to Mina in her letter, and she's like, "Oh yeah, and this guy who runs an asylum, I think you'd like this one. You know, he's pretty cool if Jonathan weren't around." And you're just like, "Oh, cool.
Oh, good.
He runs an asylum. That's cool. All right."
probably not great knowing that it's 1890.
Yeah, nope. 1890s asylums are not a place to be.
And then finally we have Dracula.
Ah, yes. We can't forget him.
like I did on my list.
I was about
But
to say, he's not on the list.
I have thoughts about Dracula as a character. Pop culture makes Dracula seem like cool and like suave and like
Yeah.
running around, like
Yeah.
making everyone fall in love with him so he can suck their blood. Dracula in the book is a loser.
Yeah, he kind of is. You're right. That's a valid assessment. He's just weird. And
Yeah.
like, I picture him in the like Scooby-Doo villain, like Crouch, when
Yeah.
I picture him moving, where he's like, dun, 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 because he's always sneaky.
Yep, very much so.
Yeah, he's a strange one.
All right, so we will end episode 1 here and then pick up with the actual discussion of the book in 2 weeks. Do you have any final thoughts on characters? Anyone that I missed that you want to discuss?
This was quite the troupe, and
Okay.
I loved and adored them. It was great to get to know them.
Was. All right. If you have any questions, comments, opinions on Dracula, feel free to write in, leave comments on the social media posts, the YouTube video, watch the YouTube channel, which you are, go back, watch the other ones if you want to. You can also find Tales from the Albright on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, on the library's website. If you have any questions, feel free to call the library at 570-348-3000 or email me at aloney@albright.org. That is ALONEY@albright.org. Thank you.